Okay, hello everybody. I'm very glad that we've got people joining today for this discussion of Laing's Politics of Experience. I'm really excited about it. I picked this book because it has a lot of personal meaning for me. It's really shaped my thinking over time. It's also how I was introduced to Laing, who has been a big influence on me. And I think that it's a very relevant book, even though it was written, decades ago at this point. I think that it can give us a lot of pointers for how to at least understand the world we're living in right now. So yeah, when I first read it, I felt like there were a lot of sweeping statements that Laing would make, that, sure, he gave examples a fair amount, but it would be like, it felt like he was introducing a lot of abstract concepts that I wasn't really necessarily following or understanding how they could be applied to life, because I'm kind of a literal thinker who likes to have something kind of concrete to grasp onto. But the longer that's gone on, and I've read the book multiple times, and I've just continued to live my life and learn about the world around me, the more it's felt like, oh, this is very concrete and applicable. So from the introduction, I had written down this quote: "Around us are pseudo-events to which we adjust with a false consciousness adapted to see these events as true and real, and even as beautiful." That, to me, feels like it is very relevant to the world we're living in now. So, I wanted to go ahead and give just a intro to how this discussion should go. So, I want this to not go past 2 hours, just to save people's time. I want there to be a 5-minute break, probably after we do chapter 2. I'm going to go through by chapter. So I've got a guide written to help us go through the book. So if there's not that many people, I would prefer not to be interrupted mid-sentence, but I feel like people could probably just jump in, or if you want to signal to me that you'd like to speak, you can just put something in the chat. I am watching the chat. You can also put something in the chat just to share an idea in text that you don't want to share out loud, or just because somebody else is talking. And so also, I've got my points that I found interesting from each chapter to bring to the table. But if we get to the end of a chapter, I will, and you feel like I haven't mentioned something that you found interesting, there will be a space for you to bring up your own points. So before we jump into chapter 1, I wanted to ask if anybody has any first thoughts, impressions, or things that they'd like to throw out there. Utter silence.
Trying to think of something.
That's okay. We can just move on to the first chapter. Hello.
Yeah, we'll go.
Did you have a thing?
No,
I was gonna.
Go ahead.
It's like feeling super relevant right now. Just kind of looking around and observing, kind of like the schizophrenic breakdown of society. This book is kind of like, oh, I can see the them and the us.
Yeah.
And whatnot.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like, for me, chapter 1 and chapter 4 are kind of the most crucial for me, and that's why I chose to do 1 through 4. 1, I feel like, is almost universally relevant, and important, especially if you're interested in psychology. I think it's important for trying to understand, like, people. But if you want to, like, chapter 4 to me feels like the most applicable to, like, our present situation, if you know what I mean. Like, really. Seriously. All right. Okay.
I love Lang's recurring theme, because I went back and looked at Divided Self again today, too, and Lang's recurring theme of just, like, the very common schizophrenic experience of, like, better dead than red, and, like, that's normal.
Mm-hmm.
And just witnessing the average insanity.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like the Divided Self also has, at least at the beginning of the book, a fair amount of discussion of, like, also, the issue of, like, doctors not understanding patients and sort of discounting them entirely, so there being kind of a schizophrenic divided there as well. Yeah, definitely. For people who haven't read The Divided Self, there's a part in, I believe, the first chapter, maybe it's the introduction, where Laing is like a girl who believes her, like he met a girl in a hospital and she believed herself to have the atomic bomb within herself. So she felt like she was dangerous and explosive. And that scene is crazy, but not like the people who talk about doing nuclear war, which at that time and now there are people who are doing, you know, powerful people who are saying that they want to use nuclear weapons. So, all right. Anything else before we start on chapter 1?
Yeah, I was also like quite shocked at like how relevant it felt. Especially considering it was during the Cold War, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was like 60, 67.
And like even though the wording would be different, like talking about the Red Scare and things like that, there's still so much fear around me all the time. In society, like you could taste it in the air. So that kind of sucks that it's still relevant.
Yeah. I mean, I won't go on too much of a tangent here just because I don't want to derail this and everything, but I'm very interested in the movements that Laing was coming out of. And, you know, the New Left and the counterculture at the time was trying to transform society based on a lot of the points that Laing made. I do think he's pretty unique, but that's not to say that he didn't have influences. Like, he was a part of a movement. There were other people saying similar things to him at the time, but the transformation they were calling for did not happen. So I feel like the world we're living in is the result of that. Yeah. Alrighty. Thank you, guys. I'm pretty excited, and it feels like we're already having a good, pretty in-depth discussion. So I will go ahead and get us into chapter 1. So the first bullet point I have here says, let's talk experience. So just kind of going into experience itself, right? So I think that it's very important to get this down at the beginning because Laing is trying to describe people as persons, right, rather than objects. So what he means by that is basically you have to understand that each person is has their own experiential world, essentially. You will not understand individual humans or interpersonal social groups or society as a whole if you cannot understand experience itself. So he characterizes it in a number of ways, and one of the quotes I found interesting was he said, all experience is both active and passive, the unity of the given and the construed. So going back to the idea of being divided, so often we do divide, like, here's what happens to me versus who I am, right? Or here's what I feel emotionally versus here's what I think. I actually had this written down later, but just since I just brought that up, Laing also talks about the weaving of different experiential modes. So really, if you think about it throughout a day, we're having like a million experiences all in sequence or simultaneously, right? So I think that this is kind of a holistic way of looking at people instead of trying to pull out little bits to see them separately, really understanding the sheer complexity, and that's why, you know, the use of the phenomenological angle to the book. So then I really like that he says only experience is evident and experience is the only evidence. So when I was taking a cognitive psychology class, I had a professor who was trying to get us to think about empiricism, which is like in philosophy, the idea that all information comes from sensory experience, right? And I really sat there and thought about it, and I was like, yeah, that's true. You can't really learn just from some kind of secret inner self that learns. Like, you learn from your experiences and what you hear and see and smell, all these different things, right? So you can understand that. People have been talking about empiricism for a long time, But I don't think that most people, and maybe even most philosophers, have really fully unpacked what that means for us, like, actually living. Like, it's not just some idea, right, off in space that's interesting to talk about in a philosophy class. It's, like, very relevant to our daily lives and to basically, like, who we are, right? That experience is our only evidence. I've read, but it's because I learned to read in the first place, and I'm only learning those things that I'm reading filtered through my experience. It's not like there's some kind of pure information download into my brain. So, that's another aspect. I also feel like animals don't have to have these kind of conversations. I mean, they're not talking in the first place, but, like, an animal wouldn't lose track of their own experience, right? It wouldn't be possible for them. So also, Laing talks about the possibility of us losing domains of experience. So we could be technically, if you're talking sensation and perception, we could technically be sensing something, like there's a real experience we could be having, but we cut ourselves off from it. And I feel like in the most extreme case, we wouldn't even have an experience anymore, just because we are so shaped to have the types of experiences which are acceptable, talked about, etc. So I think that that's one of the main things that Laing touches on in chapter 1, but it's another one that I think is harder to understand, right? So, like, when you first hear that, you're like, okay, but what does that actually mean? What does that look like? I don't know if any of you have your own thoughts on that. The main example I feel like is easier for me to use is dreaming. Because we so, in this society, just discount our dreaming lives in a way that I don't think past societies did.
Past societies did?
I said, in a way I don't think that past societies did.
That's what I meant, my bad. I don't think I really thought about it that way. Although, like, in the past couple months, my dreams have felt a bit realer to, like, a disturbing degree sometimes.
It's, like, I can say when I was a child, I've already told Taz some of this. Taz helped me get ready for this by talking to me a fair amount recently. And you as well, Beauty. I was a little girl and I had a dream that I was a sparrow. I dreamed that I was flying around a city. And I woke up and I had felt that dream so powerfully that I believed that it was true somehow. Like, I was a sparrow. And I told my mom that, and she was like, that's not real. That's not true. And dreams also, I think most importantly, dreams don't matter. You should dismiss any content you have in a dream. That's pretty crazy to say. I think that comes from the rationalism of our society.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I did the right thing recommending you Ada, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
Like, just last night, I told Taz about this morning earlier. I'm gonna send you, like, the full text in a bit, but, like, usually when I realize I'm in a dream, I wake up shortly after, but this time it took longer and that scared the shit out of me.
I think that simply the fact that we spend so much of our lives asleep and that we have these mysterious things called dreams that seem to go pretty deep in human experience, and I once heard that even octopi dream. Octopuses that change their skin, like that camouflage through their skin, they'll do it in their sleep because they're dreaming. And they're so distantly related to us that it either means that dreaming is that deep in human history, or like evolutionary history, I should say, or they developed it separately. So I just feel like it's not something that should be discounted.
We have the Jungians in the chat.
I wouldn't call
I've read
myself
a bit of
Jungian.
him.
I wouldn't call myself a Jungian. I know of Jung.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
guess the
same here.
point that I wanted to bring from Jung was like a lot of the time, like, oh my God, repressed or dissociated experiences. Like we're talking about severing ourselves from experience,
Yes.
and that can resurface in a dream. And now I'm going to go back on mute because my 2-year-old's yelling.
Yeah.
Oh,
Can y'all hear the 2-year-old crying?
The what?
there's some kind of murmuring in the background or something.
I'll just mute.
But yeah, definitely. I think that if we were gonna talk about domains of experience that people can be cut off from, we'd have to do a whole brainstorming session just on that. You know, there's definitely a lot there. So, okay. So I wanted to talk about the fact that Laing claims that natural science cannot understand the relationship between an experience and a behavior. This was a theme that made me very interested in the book because when I was studying psychology, I feel like really what I was trying to do ultimately was understand experience. But the more I got into my courses, the more it felt like we were studying the equipment. So either the physical equipment in neurology where you're studying the brain and you can study sensation and perception, you can study the nervous system, or in cognitive psychology, you can study principles that we learn about how the brain works, but none of that is actually understanding or studying experience. That's basically something that we cannot understand through natural science. So I agree with Laing on that. And so he's trying to develop a science that is fitted to experience, to really understanding and studying experience. And I think he unpacks the importance of doing this because if you don't see people as persons, but instead as objects, you are going to dehumanize them, right? So I think that that's pretty clear in the book. And I don't know if anybody has any reflections on that, but yeah, that was definitely a theme I wanted to bring up.
Well, I'm not like a philosophy major or whatever the hell, but it often feels like we're raised with like sort of like neo-Cartesian dualism where we just separate mind and body. And like the way that Laing talks about the way we tend to discredit the inner world in order to focus on the external world, but still misunderstanding both, just reminds me of that.
Yeah.
Because, I feel like nowadays it's mostly like depression is a chemical mix-up in the brain. We fail to often look at the effects of things like of poverty and such, to really look at things at a systemic level, at least in like the popular discourse. I'm sure psychologists themselves are better at this.
Not necessarily. I won't go. I don't want to get off on a sidetrack there, just because I'm trying to be mindful of the time. But yeah. So with regard to that, also I think beyond just discounting environmental factors, it's like in The Divided Self, Laing says something like, schizophrenia is not a cold. You can't have schizophrenia. You are schizophrenic. So, I think that very sad and lame people often mischaracterize Laing by saying that he discounted mental illness and sort of said, oh, it's society that's crazy, there's no such thing as mental illness. I don't think he was trying to argue about the ontology, so like the existence state of mental illness. I don't think that was his point. I think more what he's trying to do is use this way of seeing people as persons as the correct way to approach mental illness. So instead of being like, this person has depression, like it's like an illness in their brain, being like, what is the experiential world of this individual? So also not seeing them as part of a larger group of the depressed, but seeing them as an individual, right? So like in The Divided Self, he says, if you look at a person just by their like diagnostic criteria, their history, their biology, any of these things, these are all ways of not understanding the person, right? So yeah, I think that that's the best way I can try to unpack that.
I think it's illustrated really well when he's describing the experience of the schizophrenic patient
Mhm.
and the doctor is like, I stand in her way, and she
Yeah.
rails and tries to get around me, and I stick a needle in her head, and she
Yeah.
doesn't respond. And then, like, in the context of, like, I am sane and she is insane, and it's my job to study her behavior. But if we zoom out a little bit, the doctor is also insane.
Yeah.
So, like, you were
Karate
sticking a needle in a
somebody.
woman's head.
Or not.
Something here is wrong.
I think also.
And
Go ahead.
oh, it's just the discount of the inner experience of the schizophrenic person, to where, like, and it alienates them further. So a point I always like to bring up is, like, if a patient comes in talking about aliens talking in their head, and the doctor's like, "Oh snap, that's a problem. How do we medicate and get the aliens out of your head?" Like, instead to go like, "Okay, what do they say? Can you draw a picture of them? Can we connect you to this experience more?"
Mhm.
So that it can integrate, rather than continue to alienate you from it because I don't understand it.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And also going back to the doctor and patient, I don't know if I would necessarily say if you zoom out, the doctor is also crazy. I think that's true, but it's like the doctor is not only dehumanizing his patient, but kind of also dehumanizing himself, or discounting himself from the picture. There is no relationship considered. It's just the people in isolation, I think also is a factor in that. So, like, yeah, that's the best I can put it, I guess.
We're making our way into chapter 2 now.
Yeah, I know. We'll
So,
get there. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
On the doctor's end, would that be like reification, or I'm probably just misunderstanding the term?
I wouldn't think of that as reification.
It's like treating a construct as if it were real.
Yeah.
Like,
Okay.
if we reify schizophrenia, like, according to DSM diagnoses or something, and we're like, this is what schizophrenia is, we've reified a thing that is, like, at best a construct diagnostic tool pattern. It's not a real thing,
Yeah.
the way that we treat it like a real thing.
Yes.
Okay. And
Mhm.
just, I guess, just before we segue into chapter 2,
I'm not ready to go to
one of the
chapter
things
2.
well, even so, I just want to bring this up now. One of the things that kind of made me take a pause on, like, how I originally conceived of schizophrenia was actually just reading House of Leaves. Now I'm, like, very convinced that Danielewski was drawing on Laing and such. There's, like, the pelican poems and shit, and, like, there's a bit in The Bird of Paradise about pelicans. I'm like, I'm pretty certain that's something Danielewski was thinking about. But one thing that gave me pause was, like, there is a lot about schizophrenia in the book, but, like, some of it I kind of related to, especially, like, the way Johnny Truant goes on these avalanches of associations. I was just like, does that make me crazy too, or no? But, like, this book made me see that in a very different way now.
Yeah, I got you. Definitely, I don't know how. I think at this point Laing is kind of unfortunately a bit forgotten, but he took a lot of influence from novels, and perhaps he has influenced other writers as well. So
You can see the Orwell just dripping off the page.
I wanted to get to normal versus abnormal alienation. I feel like we've already kind of touched on that, but definitely that's like a key feature of the book. And again, I think the nuance here is he's definitely not saying that, like, somebody who like is having severe mental distress and paranoia and etc. is okay. He was a practicing psychiatrist, so he did work with patients. He's just saying that it's that their way of being alienated is not fitting into society. So certainly I don't think that you can see, like, somebody who thinks that their country is the best country in the world and it's therefore justified in going around and blowing up people in other countries as okay either, right? But we don't put those people in hospitals. So I think that's just kind of the main point he's trying to make there.
And draw that to current events. Because, like, Greg Bovino, head of CBP, I watched his press release where he's talking about, I assume that we're all caught up that somebody got mag dumped to death in Minnesota yesterday.
Yeah.
That happened. So there's like true believers saying that like he approached with a 9 mil they're not lying. So like I have people in my spheres like, oh, they know what they're doing, they're lying, and I'm like, no, that guy believes what he's saying. This is like somehow his experience of this event is getting colored through this worldview to the point that like he believes that what he's looking at is in fact a domestic terrorist, and it is what I would call crazy, in that it's like a fabricated symbol overlaid on reality.
Mm. Mm.
I don't know if this is right, but like it just has kept coming up to me, and like these people are, and to what degree am I crazy? Am I normally alienated from my stuff? Like how am I seeing things that isn't the way that it actually is?
I don't know. I mean, you've talked about Lacan. I guess none of us are able to truly face reality, but I definitely think that I have met plenty of people who are just living in a completely different world, and their I don't know, cognitive mode, I don't know what the right word is, but like their way of experiencing things is completely colors how they see events that occur, for sure. But yeah, again, on current events, I really love when Laing says, we cannot even begin to think, I didn't take this down as a direct quote, I don't think this is direct, but we cannot even think about behavior which is at the annihilating edge. So, as we are now, our society is so destructive, but we're not even able to fully articulate or understand the destructiveness, and I think that's a pretty scary place to be in. But he also says, or asks, who are we to decide that it is hopeless? So, as long as people keep coming into the world, there's a chance for sanity and truth and light to break through. And I do believe that, to some degree, I do. So
Keep getting another chance every moment. Mm-hmm. Every moment is another chance.
Yeah. And not just
I wanted to tie in though to.
Go ahead.
Oh, to the destructive bit. Look, you can say your thing. I wanted to bring in another thing Laing said about the destruction of experience makes our behavior destructive.
Yes, that's also written down in my notes. So
yeah, like that's hit and stuck with me several times, because I'll watch these videos and these I don't know, maybe let me take it out of watching too much doom scrolling and whatnot, but the destruction of experience meaning destructive behavior. So we look at people who are violent and like how are they cut off from themselves, or like what parts of their experience are they don't have access to because of normal or schizophrenic alienate. Like obviously with the schizophrenic violent person we can see like a magnified example of that, but like your average ICE agent cut off from his experience of the other as a human being. Mm-hmm. Hey, buddy. All right, going back on mute.
Aww.
So, also along with the quote is, if our experience is destroyed, our behavior will be destructive, comes this idea of people destroy their own and others' experience. So, I think that there's different ways of doing this. So like throughout the chapter, Laing later does the analysis of mystification of experience, where he's essentially describing what we now call gaslighting in a variety of different ways. It could be, on the one hand, a fairly non-malicious form of this type of thing. So for instance, like a parent telling their child just totally dismissing their fears of perhaps like a monster. I don't think that that's really malicious, most of the time if a parent does that, because they're trying to quiet the child's fears, they're trying to help them, but they're also dismissing that child's experience, and it really may not help them, for one thing, come to terms with what they're experiencing, and then also may not serve them well long term to, instead of dealing with the fear that they're experiencing, just say, oh, it's not real, so I just shouldn't think about it. I don't know if that will help. And then there are far more malicious forms of people trying to control each other's experience, mostly in interpersonal relationships, as Laing analyzes. Like, if I come up to you and slap you in the face, you're not going to like that. I know you're not going to like that. But if I want to slap you in the face anyway, I can come up with like a 6-month strategy to get away with doing it. You know? And so I think that type of thing is very malicious and very dangerous, but unfortunately, as Laing says, fairly common in human behavior.
That passage was very eerie to read.
Yeah.
The one, I think it was Jack and Jill, with the different layers of dismissing experience. It reminded me of, I don't know if you all know, like, the narcissist's prayer, like, it didn't happen. If it did happen, it wasn't that bad. Like, you go down the layers of being able to completely deconstruct someone's experience until they doubt their own mind. And that has happened to me, so I know that it's real and it works.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was eye-opening.
Definitely, I think that passage was my anchor in the first chapter when I was reading, because I think that I sort of zoned out. I was listening to the audiobook and I sort of zoned out a lot of the earlier chapter because my brain wasn't focusing very well on like the person's experience, whatever. And then I got to the end and I was like, oh, I know this. I know this one. This one makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, this bit, from the moment of birth, when the Stone Age baby confronts a 20th century mother, the baby is subjected to these forces of violence, called love, as his mother and father have been, and the parents and their parents before them. I was like, shit, goddamn.
Yep, it just keeps happening, right? For sure.
Now we have a mechanism for generational trauma.
Yep.
Yay!
All right, so, I've got a couple more notes for chapter 1. So we've already talked a little bit in the chat channel on fantasy with PH, and I don't know that I want to go into it a ton just for time reasons, but I do really like the Peter and Paul passage where he's talking about how two men relate to each other. Maybe I like it so much just specifically because it reminds me of a relationship that I had. I have definitely experienced what he's talking about there. But I feel like, again, what Laing's trying to get at is you can have these very important impressions, right? So this impression of, this person's closed off to me. Why is he so closed off to me? I'm just trying to be friends. I'm just trying to understand him. Or you can have the impression of, why is this person trying to invade me? Why is this person trying to get inside me? I don't trust this person. Get away from me. You can have those impressions, but almost not be aware of those impressions that you have. And then they affect how you relate to others. And in fact, I think Laing says they're more related to each other on this fantasy level than they are on the surface in reality with how they act towards each other. But people can be, again, completely unaware of them. So that was the main thing I wanted to bring up with that.
Does that almost feel visual? Like you look at someone and you just have this overlay?
I almost see that specific one as like convex and concave. Like they are fitted to each other quite well. They're just not even aware that that's how they're processing their interaction, which is interesting. So to wrap up chapter 1, at least from what I wanted to bring up from it, there's the final passage, which is the negation of experience. I think it's perhaps the most abstract and philosophical passage of the first chapter. So I'm definitely happy to unpack it as much as people want to, but for the interest of time, I'll just bring up this one quote I wrote down. He says, "When one makes the transition from being afraid of nothing to the realization that there is nothing to fear," I left out a little bit of passage, so I did an ellipses, "one's posture or stance in relation to the act or process can become decisive from the point of view of madness or sanity." So I definitely, I don't know how well I could discuss this, just because I think it's very difficult to put into words. I applaud Laing for doing so. I know what he's talking about, though, when he says, like, the fear of nothing, right? Getting too close to what we feel is the void is terrifying, but I think if you try to only see being and not non-being, that creates an imbalance. And he talks about a fair amount about creativeness, which I think is interesting, but definitely I understand what he means. Like, you can say there's nothing to fear, or you can be afraid of nothing, and you're dealing with this crisis when you come to face to face with non-being can decide whether or not you lose your mind. So I definitely appreciate the passage, even if I find it kind of hard to talk about. So at this point, we're through what I wanted to talk about with chapter 1. So does anybody have anything else they'd like to bring from the chapter to the table?
If I'm remembering correctly, we did discuss like the different levels of alienation. Like, there's a natural degree where, as individual human beings, there's always going to be some sort of separation. It's like, no matter what, we won't be able to bridge that gap.
Right.
And in this chapter, Laing does bring up the formation of memory. So, like, obviously for me, they just brought back a passage from Ada. I just wanted to read it here, especially for Entropic. Sorry, no. If people remember the same, they would not be different people. But the societies in which we exist, especially under capitalism, and in these days under neoliberal austerity, alienates us to the point where we very much have replaced images. We very much replaced people with images. And, I think some of that can tie into, like, if you're not the perfect victim, which that's something I'm kind of figuring out, so I can't go too deep into that, but it's something I've been brushing up against with recently.
Right. I think that, again, when I first read the book, a lot of it felt very abstract, but the more time you sit with it, the more it feels like you could come up with pretty much endless ways of unpacking the points he's making. So definitely you could go into how capitalism splits us off from our experience. I mean, certainly, like, the idea of, like, fetishization would be relevant there. Anything else from chapter 1 before we go to chapter 2?
Trying to think.
We don't have to add anything more. I'm just asking.
I'm trying to think. I always do.
One note that yeah, you want to go ahead, Vivi? Do you have one?
Oh, you go ahead. I couldn't think of anything.
Okay. I wanted to bring up the. I really loved the sky is blue passage. And man,
oh my god!
Go ahead. Sorry, I'm trying to pull the passage back up. It's the sky is blue. Here we go.
Right.
The sky is blue suggests that there is a substantive sky that is blue. So we've reified sky and blue. And it's all dependent on the operator is, which is a verb, but it signifies, like, essentially nothing. Just like the sky is, and blue is, and the sky is blue. But is nothing. It is a no thing that grants the being to sky and blue, which don't exist without is. And that just feels like it's a pointer to that void that we're talking about that feels uncomfy to approach, but, like, man, there's a lot in that void.
Yeah.
Yeah, the void that stands between, like, what you could think of something as an unfiltered reality, but then our perception of it, which will necessarily corrupt it to a degree. Like, in Spanish, we have two different words for it, to be, which can also be translated as is or are. That's said in it's not. It's kind of hard to explain if you don't speak it, but that's something I picked up when it comes to learning Spanish.
It was helpful for me reading that part that I had already studied Taoism, because it's a lot of it is about, being and non-being, and I think that the themes he talks about are helpful there, helpful in that sense. And Laing was definitely Christian influenced, as you can feel in the book, but he had studied Eastern religion as well. So
yeah, coming in from, like, Vedanta or like any kind of like Eastern mysticism mixed with like Western occult, and then you start reading Laing. But yeah, I don't know. I got into the Eastern stuff, and then I started getting to Western like psychoanalysis and whatnot to like try to help explain my own experience. And then Lang is just this breath of fresh air. And I'm like, oh look, all the threads they come together in this person.
Oh yes,
Exactly.
Oh, yes. Lots of threads, and also for me, the book is not that long. It's very dense. I like the density of ideas. It just kind of hands it to you, and it's not that much of a slog. I appreciate that very much, having read a fair amount of philosophy and such. Okay.
Also, really fast before we leave chapter one, I meant to do this before, but I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it like a quick write up relating the ideas of Bernardo Kastrup to this. So it's like the metaphysical connection between like is matter basic or is experience basic, and like so he'll say that like phenomenal experience is the sole universal given of reality, and it is in fact the irreducible uh, basis for reality that nothing else can be explained in terms of, or everything else can be explained in terms of experience.
Mm-hmm.
And the tie-ins to this book are just rife, and it's too much to talk about. So I'm just going to say it's mostly tied to chapter one. I will do a better write-up and then post it in the group later. But I just wanted to flag that as being awesome, and everybody should go check out Bernardo Kastrup.
Yeah, I'm excited to read it. Okay, great. So, chapter 2. So, I wanted to start off just by asking the group if we agree with Lang's views on behavioral therapy. Because when I first read it, I found it very validating for some of my experiences, and I am critical of behaviorism. But I also wonder if, to some degree, there is a place for purely trying to change behavior, and that sometimes changing behavior can lead to a change in experience. So, for instance, for me, like, I used to have some pretty serious substance abuse issues, and I think that doing a lot of inner work on my experience was important. But at the end of the day, it kind of has to be a behavioral change. And if you change that behavior, your experience will change, for sure. So I was just curious if anybody had thoughts on his descriptions of behavioral therapy.
Let's all jump on.
We got the tea to spill.
Taz, why don't you start?
All right, I'll start. Would you say that something like cognitive behavioral therapy is that considered under behavioral therapy? Or is that something different?
It partially, but like I was reading a while back that book on humanistic psychology, and both the humanists and the cognitive psychologists were criticizing behaviorism because the cognitive aspect is at least on the inner workings of the mind. So I would say it's not really fully behaviorist. Yeah. Because behaviorists' understanding of people... Now, of course, it is a complicated field, but I would say as a basic intro to it, their understanding of behaviorism was from, like, studying pigeons and stuff. And training animals. Yeah. So, like, positive reinforcement. Basically, a lot of it is rewards and punishments as well.
Yeah. I was going to say, I don't think I know enough about behaviorism to really add a whole lot beyond some of the stuff you mentioned before, like, wasn't Skinner a behaviorist?
Yes.
And he had, like, the whole box thing?
Yes.
Yeah, I was like, I do not remember learning about that. What the actual fuck is this shit?
Yeah. But, regardless of behaviorism, I do find it interesting to ask if there could be a form of therapy which is positive, like works, for instance, which just addresses the person's behavior, or does it have to address experience?
Well, so
I don't think you can understand people's behavior without understanding their experience.
But is that understanding always necessary? I'm playing devil's advocate here. I love Lang. I'm not, like, trying to criticize. I just think that this is an interesting thing to look into.
I probably have to read, like, what Dottie and Deleuze to really answer that. Okay. And I'm not going to answer that for a minute.
So we know experience is tied to behavior. I do think we can understand a person's behavior without understanding their experience because we can't experience their experience. So there's some behavior limitations we could put in place.
Right.
If a person is like, you know, you can create a change in experience by like limiting a person's behavior, right?
Right.
But with your example of your substance abuse, that behavior change came from you and from your experience. So, like, through understanding your own experience, you chose to make that behavioral change. So, I think, like, he's got a quote in here that psychotherapy is the obstinate attempt of two people to recover the wholeness of being human through their relationship with each other. And I think any psychotherapy that's, like, expressly focused on getting a person's behavior to change is going to miss that and just alienate them further.
Right. I think that what I would say is I think that psychotherapy, right? So psychotherapy that is intended to really help a person who is having serious issues should absolutely be an I thou type thing, as you just described. There may be a place for solely focusing on behavior, but that might be for people who have more self-control in the first place. Potentially.
Oh, the experience of gaining self-control is a positive experience that will like grounds you for. So like, I don't know, but behavior isn't. I'm not negating that. If all we focused on was experience, then we could all just lay in bed and be in our inner worlds and like not live our lives, right?
Yeah.
So behavior matters, and being able to modulate our behavior matters. There's room for will and self-discipline and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's got to be. If you're in a therapeutic relationship, you have to help that person grow and want that for themselves to where they can limit their own behavior. Because trying to do it externally just doesn't work.
Yeah, I think maybe what I'm talking about is more like an accountability partner than a therapist. Like just somebody who's like, are you actually doing it? You said you were going to do it. Are you actually doing it? There might be a place for that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
I think if you're going back to your therapist and going like, I've set this goal and like I'm this steps along toward achieving it, like that's a good use for therapy.
Yeah. But I did really appreciate Lang's analysis of the issues with therapy, just because I have experienced some of what he's talking about. And so he asks, why do almost all theories about depersonalization, reification, splitting, denial tend themselves to exhibit the symptoms they attempt to describe? Right? So I actually wanted to tie this back into chapter 1 with where he analyzes defense mechanisms, right? So this is another split. When we talk about somebody's experiencing, for instance, denial, we're like, oh, this is just happening to them. There's just some kind of mysterious, mystical force that's happening to them. And it's like, I think you can say that probably it has a external origin. So perhaps like from traumatic events or things that have happened to the person in their life, that's why they have this issue. But it is not now an alien and separate force. It is something they are doing to themselves. And I think that that's a very crucial insight in both of these chapters, that you can't see them as like separate. If nobody's got a comment on that, I will go to my next point, and this is my last point I had for chapter 2. I really like this quote. When our personal worlds are rediscovered and allowed to reconstitute themselves, we discover a shambles. Bodies half dead, genitals dissociated from heart, heart severed from head, heads disassociated from genitals. I definitely feel like I have had my body split up from itself, my person split up from itself, and I have lost, going back to domains of experience, I have lost literal sensation in my body. Like I have, over time, just through experiences I had in life, it's like your brain stops processing, paying attention to, or understanding sensory input that you're having from your body, right? So, yeah. That's just something that I really liked in this chapter.
You're in good company. I read this stuff because definitely experience of being split from self or having like internal divisions, and like the last point you brought up, like realizing that you're doing it to yourself, realizing that the splitting is coming from internally, that the intrapsychic conflict that you're dealing. I almost feel like, and this is shown in neuroscience, like the dissociated brain has neural structures that do not communicate to each other. They strongly interconnect with themselves and don't integrate with the surrounding neural structures.
Right.
And that's experienced as fucking painful.
Yeah. And it's, we're going to talk about mystification next chapter. It's real. Like, this stuff is real. I don't feel like that's not very substantive, but that's all I can say right now just because I'm really thinking and feeling it right now. Like, I have been in these places where, when I think back on it, I was in intense distress, physically, emotionally. I had all these different parts of myself, but I was so dissociated that I didn't even have the ability to describe what was happening. I wasn't even fully aware of my own distress, which is a strange thing to say. If you're in intense distress, how can you not be aware of it? But this is something Laing talks about in The Divided Self. As human beings, we have an inbuilt defense mechanism of splitting. So basically, like, if something very traumatic happens, you try to, like, disconnect from it. And so if you talk to people who are very traumatized, like they just went through, like, maybe a car crash, they might say, it feels like it didn't happen to me. It feels like it happened far away from me, or something like that. What Laing says in The Divided Self is there are people who end up in that state permanently. And yeah, I know that. So definitely.
And okay, I'm trying to find this one quote that just came to mind. Well, let's search for that. I already talked about this with you, Zeal, and I'm pretty sure also Taz, where, like, for a while I did just feel very split off from myself. Like I was observing myself, which is something that we see in the next chapter, really. Let's see, I'm trying to find.
I think it's to answer what you just said in the chat here. Sorry, is there something I should refer to you by beyond your entropic? But
should I be Josh?
Sure, Josh. I think it's so Josh says in the chat, is it possible to come back though, reintegrate, re-embody? I hope so. I think it's possible. I have made a lot of progress. And
I do too. Yeah, same.
I think I'm about as integrated as I will be. Perhaps there's more. But I think I have made a huge amount of progress in, like, the last, like, 5-6 years. It's about how long.
All right, I found the quote. It's from The Garden of Eating Mist by Tan Tuan.
Okay.
I do have some issues with the book. Like, I don't know a whole lot about, like, the Boer War and shit, but I don't think I've heard much of anything good about it.
Okay.
But it's about a woman whose sister died in a Japanese concentration camp during World War II, and she's trying to build a Japanese garden in honor of her. But the protagonist is very prejudiced against Japanese people because of that, even though she's under the stewardship of Aritomo, who's like the owner of the only Japanese garden in Malai.
Okay.
I mean, this quote, I'm pretty sure this is a piece of dialogue from her. I was severed from the world I had known. There was no shadow beneath my feet. I felt I was moving through a landscape that was familiar, but at the same time, unrecognizable to me, I said. Sometimes I'm so frightened. I'm frightened that this is how I would feel for the rest of my life. And when I read that, it really fucking hit.
Yeah, that's a good quote. Does anybody have anything else from chapter 1? Because otherwise I'll go ahead and have us do our 5-minute break. I mean chapter 2. Yeah, sorry.
Yes, a big one. Laing says the dreadful has already happened, and I should have, wasn't prepared. I have the book in front of me, but
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, he says the dreadful has already happened, and it ties it's a Heidegger's phrase. Here we go. It has happened to us all. The therapists, too, are in a world in which the inner is already split from the outer. The inner does not become outer and the outer inner just by the rediscovery of the inner world. That is only the beginning. As a whole, we're a generation so estranged from the inner world that many are arguing it does not exist, blah, 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 we go on. But the horrible split already occurred. The worst already happened. And it reminds me of Winnicott claim, like, the breakdown you fear has already occurred. The schizoid person, in trying to like stop something horrible from happening, because there's this feeling of just like something has gone horribly wrong or something will go horribly wrong, and trying to prevent it.
If I don't if I don't keep splitting myself into pieces, I'm going to fall into pieces.
Right, yeah. And then it's just kind of like, hey, chill out. The horrible thing that you're trying to stop from happening already happened.
Yep.
And then the beauty there is, like, you know, staying with Winnicott and Egan and whatnot, like, relax into disintegration. Like, just relax into it like a cold shower. It's already happened. There's nothing to do now. You cannot stop it. And
yeah, when I was 14 or 15, there was a moment where I asked myself, why do I act like an abused person? This was like 2 years before I actually started confronting, you know, my upbringing and such. And even then, it still took a while. It's only been like the past several months that I confronted the fact that I myself had suffered incest, which was also another major factor in the way I felt so alienated from myself. The worst already happened, if I'm understanding it right.
Yep.
Yeah. I did the same comment. Somebody was on, I think it was a Jungian subreddit or something, and they were going like, hey, is it okay if I do mystical practice after I've done psychosis? And my answer was like, yep. So he was talking about the quote, the psychotic drowns in the same waters the mystic swims in.
Right.
I don't know if y'all heard that. I have a corollary to the quote.
That's hard.
And it's, if you find yourself in the unfortunate position of being a psychotic, it's best to learn to swim. Like, go ahead and do the mystic thing. There's nothing to lose. Why wear a raincoat if you're already wet? Like, just start swimming.
Yeah.
Figure it out.
Absolutely. All right, I'm going to leave us off there and go ahead and have a 5-minute break. Okay. Hello, everyone. We are back for Chapter 3. So, I have less notes on this one. I'll definitely be happy for other people to bring in their own points. But first of all, I have the chapter is on the mystification of experience, right? So Laing says, exploitation must not be seen as such. It must be seen as benevolence. Persecution, preferably, should not need to be invalidated as a figment of paranoid imagination. It should be experienced as kindness, right? So it's not just that gaslighting we were talking about earlier, of being like, oh, you're paranoid. This level of mystification is all the way to, you should, like, controlling how things are experienced. So you don't even realize that you're being exploited. You don't even realize you're being abused, because now you see that as love. And I think that this is a very real and very dangerous thing that Laing is talking about here. So
you call this the narcissistogenic experience?
Huh?
Like, where you had more things to go into, but as you were talking about that, it just clicked for me that, like, this experience of the negation of experience through love, like the violence that masquerades and acts through love, because it has to be benevolence, but like, this is what generates narcissism. This is splitting you. Because I think that narcissism is a form of schizoid, right? They're closely related. But this inversion of love into something that demands that you perform a certain way or be a certain thing, and gives you this image in your head that, like, when you correspond to this, that we're all demanding you be. I know I'm going a little bit off script from the book right now. Just like, I had a light bulb moment.
Point. There's nothing wrong with bringing in your own ideas. That's a good thing. Based on what you
this sort of alienation from experience that is tied to love feels, and I think I've never heard the term narcissistogenic, but it's intuitive.
That makes sense. Yeah. I also think, based on what you just said, So if this is not real love, right? So if we're talking about violence, but violence is being cast as love, then the child, the person, is not being okay, all right. Hold on a sec. Well, we don't
No,
need
my
to
bad.
talk. It's okay. It's all right. So if we're talking about violence masquerading as love, and we're all experiencing this, right? Or most of us do. Then a child growing up is not being adequately loved. They're being mystified. They're being told you're being loved, but they don't actually feel it. They might try to convince themselves, or they might feel something, but I think that for proper ego development, there should be real and lasting love. So again, for me, at least my understanding of narcissism it definitely has to do something with the ego. So your point, Josh, was that if you're told you will be loved if you live up to this standard, then people start to demand that kind of narcissistic supply in response to, well, I'm living up to the standards I was given. And then also, like, the unstable ego, the need for constant external validation, right, comes from this lack of love that people experience. So I actually really like that tie in there.
Yeah, Lang doesn't say. I didn't think of it until just now. This wasn't in my notes or anything, but as like the way that you were framing how Lang was talking about it, just like made that click. And I'm like, oh dang.
Yeah. I think that people didn't talk about narcissism as much back then, but
Not so he's referencing Winnicott and Bion a lot. They're not talking about it. It's not really till you get like there. Obviously they were talking about Freud talked about narcissism. But it's being developed in like object relation schools more than like kind of Kernberg. Good.
Right.
Anyway.
I definitely think that it actually I've been thinking about the narcissism question recently. Because that's something that people love to put on each other. And it's definitely something I might be interested in developing further. So I might actually try to talk to you about that at some point, or just try to develop further more. I'd like to do almost like an analysis of narcissism in discourse and in reality, perhaps, because I do think it's a real and pressing problem of our current age, but at the same time the term has been so abused, so it's kind of hard to pin down.
It is now a very popular way to blame another person for everything.
Yes.
And ignore what you are doing wrong.
Yes.
So it's really easy to go like, they're just a narcissist and that excuses you from whatever, but like the experience of narcissism is heavily tied into the experience of schizoid and that false self. So the narcissist is trying to reify. Sorry, I'll talk about this for days. Yeah, we can totally talk about narcissism. I think it is an existential problem. More than the pop psychology version of it, which just sucks and is heinous.
No, I agree. I absolutely agree. And I don't, how about this? I think that I don't have as many notes for chapter 3, so potentially we could come back to this point at the end, if time allows. We'll see how the rest of chapter 3 goes. But yeah, so then he analyzes how violence masquerades as love, and then he says, that the colonists not only mystify the natives, as Fanon so clearly shows, so that's referencing like The Wretched of the Earth and his work, but Laing is trying to analyze how colonists mystify themselves. So we have to sustain this image of ourselves which allows us to continue our colonization and exploitation, and in order to keep this system going, there has to be like a massive campaign of mystification, and that is done in we interiorize that violence upon ourselves and our children while employing the rhetoric of morality to describe this process, right? So yeah, I felt this very, very deeply when I first read it. I think it's true. I won't go into this, but I feel like I've almost had a model of this in my own family growing up, and so it's yeah, it's very real, and I don't know if anybody else has any thoughts on it, but for me, I don't even know what I can add. Yeah.
The amount of moralization that happened where, like, you would make a mistake, and they would go, like, that's wrong, you've committed a moral crime. because of it.
Yeah. And I think also, like, I don't know, that it maybe we were talking about narcissism, maybe almost talking about sociopathy in a similar sense of, if you're going to, for instance, like we were talking about ICE earlier, or colonization, war, socialization of especially young men, but I mean the whole culture is affected, to make people warlike, you basically have to raise people to dehumanize and to lack empathy, right? At least towards the proper and correct people, right? And things like that. I mean, it's just, I've always thought that it's very real. And actually, years ago, this is something I looked into, that you see higher levels of violence across the board in societies where there is child abuse. So, if, like, how people raise their children is very, very relevant to how that society runs. We'll talk more about so Josh says in the chat, violence against us is taboo, violence against them is moral. Well, we can get into that in chapter 4, because I feel like even there it's kind of complex. But I think that what you just wrote is supposed to be how it is, right? That's what people say, like the patriotic line, but there's exceptions, of course. Okay, so then Laing talks about, you know, love and violence being polar opposites. I don't know if anybody wants to add to that. I personally really resonate with this passage, but I feel like if you could define love in various ways that might not reflect what Laing is talking about.
It was a challenging one for me to read, because in my life, like, the most violence that has been done to me has been in the name of love by people who've said they love me. So I don't really know how to separate violence from love, in, like, conceptually. I think, me and you did talk about that. I had another thought or another quote, but I've lost it now. I think part of, like, how you're taught to, we are taught what to experience and what not to experience.
Right.
This kind of comes up later with, like, the us versus them chapter.
Yes.
But, like, when you're taught to feel like that you're supposed to love someone, or someone is supposed to love you, a lot of really bad things can happen.
Yes. This is actually something we mentioned, mentioning Alan Watts. I think that wasn't actually on the recording, but he talks about the fact that love cannot be forced. So, like, and this is something Laing analyzed elsewhere, which might help with any of, like, any trouble you might have with his description of love, because it's like, love is something that happens or it doesn't. So you shouldn't, like, I think Alan Watts once said, like, if you're talking to your wife and she asks, do you love me? It's not acceptable to reply, I'm really trying to. You know what I mean? Like, but at the same time, like, how much do I go into this? I got really interested in the question of spontaneity a while back, because I felt like one of the things I had trouble with growing up is all these things that are supposed to happen involuntarily. So, like, you don't control your sleep, for instance. You can try to go to sleep, but sometimes trying to go to sleep makes you not be able to go to sleep. So if you are commanded to sleep, and you will be in trouble if you do not sleep, it can create this kind of neuroses, right? And I think that love is the same way. I don't think that Laing is trying to promote love is all you need, love is so beautiful, we should all just love forever, or something like that. It's, to me anyway, it's a spontaneous emotion that just occurs. So I have a rule with myself that I don't say I love you if I don't feel it. If I don't feel love for somebody in a moment, I try not to feel guilty about it. And so it's just something that you accept and happens. If there becomes a commandment to love, that's a problem. You must love your family. You must love the person you married. That doesn't work. And that I do think that also becomes violence.
In the case of family, it's almost always enforced when the family is negligent of the child to some degree. Like, materially, I was always taken care of. It's part of the poverty and all that shit. But emotionally, I was pretty much on my own in my family for the most part. So, like, as a kid, I wondered, I want to be hugged, but I don't accept any of my mother's physical affection. Why is that? And looking back on it now, being degraded every time I cried or made a mistake is the reason.
Yeah.
And yet, I was supposed to love her, even though I didn't quite feel it. In spite of, appreciating what she sacrificed for me.
Yeah. You
must. It's the great crime of Christianity, just like commanding love from people, which doesn't happen when you try to force it. So, like, there's all these people, and then they make up what love is supposed to be, because I have to love you, so...
And it leads to real hypocrisy. Real mind-blowing hypocrisy and violence, yes. So the last note I had for chapter 3, I really love the, he didn't write this himself, he's citing sociological analysis of American schools. But I appreciate those passages very much, and one of the points I wanted to bring up with them is... for quite a while now, I've had an interest in, like, linguistic analysis, and also, like, yeah, we'll have time for notes on chapter 3. We'll get there. So, hold on, what was I thinking? No, it's fine. So, I have an interest in how people can, again, like, shape experience, shape behavior through their speech and through how they set up a situation. Obviously, authorities have more power to do this, but I think it can happen in interpersonal relationships as well. So, like, the sociologist analyzing the classroom was pointing out that, like, the teacher would ask a question like, which one of you nice little boys wants to go take the observer's jacket, right? So, the way that question is framed is, like, certainly one of you will want to, and then, like, in inputting the desire to do so, and, like, almost making it into a competition of who will be the chosen one who gets to look like a good little boy who takes the jacket. So, like, all of the different scenarios which are discussed in this chapter include examples of this, setting up a competition where girls have to bake the best and boys are the ones who judge. The analysis of that is really good, and to me it's been very important for me and very relevant for me to be able to analyze how people put things, how they set up situations to create a certain effect. And I don't even think most of the time that a person doing this is consciously thinking. It's just kind of, again, like a mechanism. Of course, the person is doing it, so there is, like, will involved, but it is, like, another, sorry, now I feel like my mind's kind of going off, but I think one of the powerful things about this book, and also the way that these chapters are structured, is it goes from the individual and the like, atomized, like, unit. So, like, you start with analyzing how certain things work within an individual, but then you can see these same mechanisms playing out on a much larger scale of a classroom, of a social circle, all the way to, like, global politics. That's how Laing kind of takes this book, and I really appreciate that approach. I think it's possible to analyze things this way, and also it makes sense, because where does society come from if not from the individual units? So I going back to the classroom thing, the reason I brought that up is just, I feel like you could say the same thing that Laing talked about with individuals feeling like a mechanism, there's almost a mechanism of defense mechanism, right? That feels like it's just happening to them. There's almost something similar going on in these classroom settings of like this mechanism of control, which even the people involved don't really seem to be aware of.
I think the word would be like isomorphic, wouldn't it? In terms of like taking a smaller sample of something to analyze the structure of a much larger thing. Or maybe a different word, I can't remember.
I was thinking microcosm and macrocosm.
That too, yeah.
Alright, so that's all I had for chapter 3. Anybody else have chapter 3 notes? I think you did, Josh.
Yeah, I wanted to respond to the last thing that you were like, you see the behavior, you infer the experience underneath, but like when I see that and like I'll get a vibe and then I'll call it out and then the person is upset.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that means that I saw something accurate or and they responded negatively, or if I saw something inaccurate. I don't know how much to trust myself there.
Yeah.
But
that turns into what I call the reality wars. And I think that is a very maddening thing.
It's better not to engage with it at all. Just take your insight and don't speak it.
Yep.
The other thing that I wanted to talk about violence being the opposite of love, because I also have an idea that indifference is the opposite of love. And then I was like, wait, so there's the behavior of love, right? So the behavior wants to understand a thing without changing it. So you can behave in a loving, like even if you don't experience the love in that moment, simply through like non-interference. Like Watts has the analogy of like, if you love a river, you can't take it home in a bag. It ceases to be a river when you like do the violence of like scooping it into a bucket. It's no longer running. It's no longer the river. You tried to change it. So like maybe violence and love are opposites on the behavioral level. And then on the experiential level, because I have this idea that like love and hate are really tied together, and like they're both involved with like identification and experiencing that thing as part of yourself. So like the parent really fiercely loves the child, they're experiencing love, but they're doing violence. And
I don't personally know if I agree with that, but that might I think some of this also has to do with definitions. And this is something me and Taz were talking about recently. But like I do think that love and hate can be related, or they sort of can be the flip side of one another. But I don't think that I have ever felt what I feel as love and then wanted and done violence to a person. I think that what you're talking about with the identification of a parent with their child is ego, not love. Because that's like saying you are an extension of me, and so I will control you, which is not love. But I think it also comes
down to definitely definition world.
Yeah.
Like how do we slice this pie?
Yeah, exactly. So, I think you can just take what Laing says as it is, and then if you want to, you can develop like your own way of seeing what love is.
I definitely think through the behavioral aspect that like love and violence are absolutely opposites. I was like, how do I grok what Lang's saying? I'm like, oh yeah, behaviorally.
All right. Anything else for chapter 3 before we get to our last chapter? No. Alrighty.
So the last one's the juicy one.
Huh?
The last one's the juicy one. I'm excited for that.
No, chapter 4 is really something. So, starting out, I wanted to bring up, he says, it's page 65, he talks about the intolerance we have towards different fundamental structures of experience. So, this is just something to kind of set the tone or the mood. I feel like what he's getting at here, if we're talking about us and them, is when there is an us, a nexus as he refers to it, people are supposed to have similar and compatible experiences. So this is another way in which experience is shaped and controlled. So if somebody has a fundamentally different way of experiencing, then they will not fit into us, I think, is the point there. And I don't know if anybody else has thoughts on that, but I just wanted to start off the chapter with that point.
Like the people you feel like you vibe with are the people that are having like compatible experiences to you, right? Like they see things in the same ways. And then we say we vibe with them. These are my people.
Mm. Or also,
or maybe I got it inverted and the us comes first, and now the us is the family, and now you're required to have similar experiences to your family, and if you're not, then you're somehow breaking the contract to be us.
I don't know that you can separate the two in a sense, and that's an interesting question, because I do like to be around people who have a similar experience of the world as I do, because like you were saying earlier, if you can't even have that conversation with somebody about their behavior or about something going on in the world without there being a complete shutdown, what relationship can there be? But then there is also, like, I wouldn't want to, like, at the end of the day, Vivi shared that auto quote earlier, like, sometimes I have a sense of almost wanting to have another self that would just mirror me perfectly, but that wouldn't actually be a relationship. You know, that's just trying to extend my ego again. So I want to be around people who are different from me and bring something different to the table. And if I love them, I wouldn't want to try to change their experience. But then when it comes to kind of the gangsterism that Laing refers to with some us groups, in-groups, it's like, it's kind of a scary thing, and I've actually watched it develop in groups that are newly formed. Like, people don't even seem aware of it, or it's not like there's any discussion of it. It's not like there's one enforcer who's controlling everyone's experience, but you can just watch people fall into lockstep. I've seen this happen in workplaces, for instance. So, like, at the beginning of a season at a workplace, everybody there says, I want time off, I like time off, I want to spend time by myself, and I want to get away from this place sometimes. And then by the end, they're, like, completely, subsumed by the workplace, and they're like, actually, I don't care if I don't get time off, or I don't care how I'm treated, because I'm part of this place, and so my experience is how this place wants me to experience it, which is kind of scary to watch happen. So yeah. So the next. Mm-hmm.
I was just gonna read from the, like, just under gangsters, like, each person is expected to be controlled and to control the others by the reciprocal effect they have on the other. It's automatic. It's not.
Yes. And that's what makes it so difficult to grasp and describe, and again, that's why I'm very grateful to this book for somehow managing it. But yeah, going through the book again, my next point was him talking about how we have collective reified objects which are interjected or pseudo things. So this feels like it should be something very obvious, and it's something that you technically understand from a pretty young age once you start understanding, like, language and concepts and how things work. But it's like difficult to fully wrap your mind around the full implications of, like, there is no such thing as the United States. It exists because we agree that it exists. Things like that, so.
I just posted that same thing in another group chat, and everybody got really mad at me.
What a surprise. What a surprise.
Oh no!
There is no United States. It's always people doing stuff. Like, you can say Nestle killed 11 million babies, but Nestle didn't do that. There is no Nestle.
Yep. And again, technically we should all know this. Technically, it should be obvious, but when it comes to how people live in the world, it doesn't seem like we really understand it. And it's a very, that's why it's still important, even if it's technically basic. So next I wanted to talk about the scandal network analysis. This is something that I feel like when I first read it, I didn't quite feel like I understood it, or feel like I thought it was legit or something. And then now I'm like, oh yeah, I've seen this now. I know this. Just the I think the point he's trying to bring up with this scandal network. So if you remember, this is the passage where he's talking about, like, for instance, a young couple where the girl gets pregnant, and so they end up getting married, even though they don't actually like each other. And it's basically because of the social pressure, but nobody in the scandal network is saying, I'm upset by this. They're saying, think of what everyone else will think of this. Which is, I think, pretty interesting and a good way of kind of analyzing how these things work, practically.
Yeah, I kept thinking back to what W.E.B. Du Bois called double consciousness, but obviously that term has the racial aspect, and it isn't quite the same as what R.D. Laing described here. So, like, I think I like to describe that as, like, I like to call that multi-consciousness, where it's like you're aware of how other people are aware of you, and how they'll be judging you, how they'll perceive you, and so you react accordingly. You know, I say it because double consciousness is already a term, and I don't want to take that from Du Bois. But, you know, Galen didn't quite have a term for this. I'm just like, let me think of something. So, multi-consciousness is the term I came up with.
Yeah, and it makes sense. And it's...
Or you're at least simulating it. Not aware of it, but simulating it.
Well, how would you distinguish those two?
Like, so if you're aware... Alright. Me or Vivi?
You.
Sorry, I'm talking too much.
No, you're
good. So Lang said the them is always to be found elsewhere.
Right.
Right? So, like, what will they think? They are always elsewhere. They're providing a constraint on your behavior and your experience despite never being in the same room with you. And so, like, when we're going, like, we know how other people will react. I'm like, we don't know, we're guessing.
Right.
So we simulate our impression, like, and we're getting back to fantasy now, but, like, we're simulating how we imagine the other person will react and we respond accordingly. But if we're split off from our own experiences, we do the projection thing and we assume that they will judge us for this, but in reality, we're judging ourselves and blaming it on them, and they are a convenient excuse to be found elsewhere.
Or also just people can internalize this to the degree almost of psychosis. I mean, I think especially with the internet now, it's like, if all you do is spend time on the internet and read other people's opinions, you know what people say. It is real that people will judge you, attack you, you know, think that you're wrong for how you experience, how you think, your beliefs, whatever. But then you internalize that to the degree that you are not you. You are you plus what you have internalized. And then you basically can no longer even act as yourself spontaneously because you are so concerned with how you will be perceived. I've seen this somewhat in myself, and I've seen it a pretty bad case in another person before. So, but yeah, so I had the quote written down, which is related to this. Such collective power is in proportion to each person's creation of this power and his own impotence. So, a little bit different than what I was talking about with the internet, but this, like, I mean, this comes down to things like, I was just following orders. Like, it's like, I have no power. I am just a little plaything in the hands of the collective, and the collective has the power, kind of, which is very difficult to kind of break free from, I think. Yeah, he also said... Or
to even communicate that to the people who have abdicated their identity to the group identity cannot, because it's reified. Like, the United States exists. Like, I am a servant of the United States. And that constrains my actions. And then to try to tell them that that's not real just creates the cognitive dissonance and the backlash response.
Yeah. Yep. And he says, each denies any internal bond with the others. Each person claims his own inessentiality. So yeah, I think that kind of covers the us the first part of the chapter of, like, yeah. But then he starts getting into them. Sorry, I feel like I kind of lost the thread here. Hold on. Did anybody else have anything to add? Let me regain my composure.
I found it quite freeing, almost, to, like, shine a light on these power structures and in-groups and out-groups and all of these things and say, well, these are just people. You can defect. Like, that's the main fear of the group is dissolving.
Yes.
I mean, it's hard to do, but everybody has that power.
Yeah. And that's why also they become angry at you if you threaten to defect. I actually can remember a conversation I had with my older brother. We were driving around, and we were talking about something. He's always loved to kind of identify with in-groups, so he gets, like, way too into sports and, you know, very patriotic, whatever. And we were talking, and I was like, I just think it's a bad thing. Like, I think that the idea that we should all see ourselves as part of this greater collective, I just don't feel that, and I think that it's dangerous, and he got really mad at me. So I guess that there's just something in me that, maybe when I was younger, when I was like a child, like a young child, I really loved to be like, I'm part of my family, and my family's awesome, so I'm awesome. This is my country. My country's great. Like, that sort of thinking, but that kind of fell off for me at a certain point, and I could no longer feel that way. But unfortunately, it's still a very powerful force in our world, to be that way and identify as not just me, but me plus group. A term in psychology is basking in reflected glory or something like that, like boosting yourself by identifying with a group.
Like when your football team wins and you get to say, we won, but you didn't do anything.
Right. But yeah, so the next thing I have written down is the highest value of the Nexus is reciprocal concern. I feel like this is the area of the book. I think all of us here can handle this, but for some people this would be difficult to handle with the analysis of the family, for instance, because, again, going back to the idea of like violence or whatever you want to call it being experienced as love, I think for so many people what Laing is talking about and breaking down as a negative thing is something they experience as love and as very beautiful. But I think I did feel throughout my life like this idea that I have to be concerned about, not just like care about, but like be really interested in and like invested in my whole family just because we're related. So whether or not I have anything in common with them, regardless of how they treat me, whatever, it's just like a law. You must be concerned with your family. I think a lot of people do hold to this, but I think that Laing is right to kind of break that down. So yeah.
Yeah, similar experience, and of course it leads into chapter 5 of the lose-lose situation of being trapped in a place that you know is bullshit and trying to argue with us, but you are consistently made wrong. Not caring about what the rest of the group cares about.
Right.
And then they will do their level best to make you care.
Yes.
And then you lose your fucking mind.
Yeah. Yes. Laing says, a family can act as gangsters, offering each other mutual protection against each other's violence. So it's like, Taz mentioned the threat of defection. Laing says, in this game, it is a foul to use this interdependence to hurt the other, except in service of the Nexus. But the worst crime of all is to refuse to act in terms of this presumption. So it's like, we're a family, we all love each other, nobody here would hurt each other, except if you seem like you're gonna do something against us. Then all of a sudden it's like fair game. You can do whatever you want to the person because you must force them back into the Nexus because you're threatening the Nexus. And it must continue to exist no matter what. And especially if you act like kind of indifferent, right? Like if you act like I don't actually buy this Nexus, that's the worst thing you can do, according to Laing.
I left the Catholic Church like 13 or 14 and got a really good crash course in this.
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah. No,
So I'm
actually, I
grateful
was
to Lang
about
for
this.
being able to put this experience into words.
Yeah.
Because leaving the Catholic Church is this.
Yeah. I went through a similar experience. I lost my faith at about, I was Protestant and about age 13. Yeah. So, fun times. Great times. It's awesome.
I have a really funny case of this. No, only my cousin knows on me because everybody else in my family doesn't fucking know. Like, I've been since I was like 7. I know that because it was the last year I spent at that one specific school. I was just like, this doesn't make any fucking sense to me. Not in those words, but like, I know that if I ever do tell my family that, it's gonna cause some sort of like fractionalism. Like, I don't want to fucking deal with that bullshit.
Yeah.
Which ties into like mystification, where like I have to present an image that I'm not, and they tell me they love me, but it's just this puppet I've been, stringing along for a while now. I'm just like, we don't share any interests. We don't have any similar thoughts.
Yeah.
So like when they say they love me, I'm just like, you really don't. I can't even explain it to you because I know I'm gonna sound like a fucking crazy person to
No,
you.
yeah. No, and that there's a divide in you guys' experiential worlds. They have this experiential world that says we're a family, we all love each other, I know I love him. They don't even realize how remote that is from your world and your experience. When we're talking about religion, I feel like this is another good way to talk about clashes in experience and people trying to control how others experience the world. When I lost my faith, I became an existential threat to my family because I don't know how to describe this to people who didn't grow up around people who are super religious, but it's like they cannot even accept the existence of non-belief. Obviously they know that some people don't believe, but to actually talk to somebody and to try to enter their experiential world, somebody who's a non-believer, is a threat because it could somehow affect their own belief. And their belief structure is so fragile that they literally have to not even remotely hear or listen. And the only option that they feel they have is to fight with everything within them to force you to be religious again, or to deny that you even lost your faith. They come up with some kind of narrative that's like, she's just angry at God, right? So she still believes in God, for sure. Absolutely, she still believes in God. She's just angry right now, and she'll come back around as a prodigal child, sort of thing. I've seen this up front and up close, so yeah.
Dave, I've even read in What Christians Believe by Bishop Robert Barron. In the very first chapter, he talks about this of like, we have to shore up each other's belief. My faith in one part of the creed might be strong while yours is weak, and we need to like lend each other, like, okay, so you're participating in like keeping this blind belief going, and you actually know, so this is a bishop, so he actually knows that that's what's going on and is still thinking that that's a good thing.
Right. They really, it's very interesting, the kind of mental loops that they get into, and I've definitely seen it up close. So I have a couple notes here just to wrap up the whole book from chapter 4, but also just my bullet point says importance and relevance of book. So Laing says, at this moment in history, we are all caught in the hell of frenetic passivity. We find ourselves threatened by extermination that will be reciprocal, that no one wishes, that everyone fears, that may just happen to us because no one knows how to stop it. We may all be, and this is a separate quote, we may all be destroyed by a quote-unquote being that never was, except in so far as we all invented her or it or him. So, yeah, definitely I think that this book continues to be relevant, unfortunately.
Yeah, that one hurts.
I mean, it's just, we're definitely facing a lot. I think that the ability to articulate this stuff is a good thing. It has helped me immensely in life. I don't know how to spread these insights in a way that would make any kind of difference, though, but at least I can feel less insane myself.
I think that probably actually is the valid form of like resistance, revolution. I don't see any way to do top-down revolution and like replace an upper power structure. I think the best revolution is the one that we're doing right here, right now. The development of individual consciousness and coming up with new ways to figure out groups, and like the fact that we're just 4 people on a call, like it's still happening. This is the thing. This is what needs to happen.
At least for me,
So,
I would love if I could press a button and the world was just a better place and there was no crazy people in power anywhere and everything was wonderful, but I don't have that button and I don't know what to do. I've spent a lot of time thinking about it and I've not come up with any answers, so the best thing I can do is try to transform my own life and to reach other people who are on a similar path and try to build something. That's basically all I've come up with, so sorry guys, I don't have much to give.
You must do all that. Agreed fully. You must do that and imagine Sisyphus happy.
Yeah. I'm he's having a good time with that boulder. Looks fun. Looks fun.
I don't really know what to say because I feel like I'm kind of the odd one out here. I'm still learning about Marxism, so I do have to hold my tongue for a while. But I'm looking at the USSR and China, and I'm like, no, it's not necessarily that it's bad to be part of a collective. Like in the case of the U.S., the collective identity is an imperialist power. That's not China. That wasn't really the USSR beyond like the social imperialism in like the 70s and 80s and such, and even then. But again, there's still a lot I'm going to be learning there, so I do kind of have to hold my tongue because I'm not well informed, and I could change my mind later on.
My problem with I'm not somebody who necessarily is like the type of person who argues, oh, revolution never works, because I think that that's I don't necessarily what I would say is I don't romanticize it. So I don't necessarily think that it's all rainbows or going to lead to the perfect outcome, which is proposed in the idea of a classless, stateless global society. But that's not to say that I don't think that violent political upheaval is quote unquote a bad thing either, and that there are times and ways in which it has led to a different result, which has been for the most part materially better than what was before. But my problem with the United States situation is that going to happen? Is that remotely feasible? Because we don't live in the past. We live in the now. So, like, is there going to be some kind of violent revolution that's going to overthrow the U.S. government? It has more military power than is even conceivable. So, that would be more my reason that I focus more on what I can do with my own life. I used to be a lot more involved in protests and trying to be involved in organizing. And I feel like the problem of passivity that we see in the world now is because the truth is the situation is not good. So I feel like for me, this is just the answer I've come to, divestment. Like I'm trying to do like BDS within the US because that's the best thing I have been able to come up with personally.
Well, all I'll say is that I don't romanticize these countries either. Haven't actually talked with MLs a lot more recently, or since like April or May of last year. They don't really romanticize it either, or say like it's all going to be perfect afterwards.
I see romanticization from the left in general.
To a degree, yeah.
But
in general, yeah. But like the MLs that I've spoken with, at least. Yeah, but that's just the usual thing I confront whenever I bring up the Soviet Union and such, and so I'm just kind of used to responding that way. But again, I'm still learning it, so who knows what the hell I even think like 2 years from now.
I think or just coming from psychoanalysis world, regression is needed at certain stages of a person's growth. So like if we look at society and kind of like treat it like an individual person and go like, okay, this person's a dissociated psychotic schizoid mess, it has to regress a bit. And I think we've gotten like really comfortable with not suffering in this country. Mm-hmm. And if, say like we're losing the nexus of the us because we're getting mag dumped on the street now, So the us is kind of breaking down and like, what is a United States? Who feels like an American? Who gives a shit about this right now? But if there is breakdown, then that will be in line with just I don't know. I think things need to get worse in order for them to get better, and the existing regime is going to collapse under the weight of its own corruption, kind of just because it can't help it, and that's what history shows us that these things do when they live too long.
Historically speaking, things have always gotten really, really fucking bad before any actual change was enacted. That's vastly oversimplifying it, but looking at the conditions that were in Cuba, Russia, Korea, Vietnam, it's the trend. It's not much,
we're all
Chile.
Really accustomed to Netflix and air conditioning in the grocery store being stocked.
But I'm also like, I won't say that I have anything meaningful to say either, for now anyhow. Like, at least I have to do some sort of like agitprop later on, but I haven't done the reading yet, and I got a bunch of other shit I want to get to first.
For me,
probably live through it.
I'm trying to if I'm trying to live in accordance with reality as much as possible with the world I'm living in, I want to live like this is really happening. So if I've learned to think about behavior at the annihilating edge, if I've learned that now, then I have to live like it's happening. So that's the only conclusion I've come to. So
like, what is happening?
Live like we're annihilating ourselves. Like, live with if that's the reality, if the reality is the human species is insane and also is driving itself off the edge of a cliff, how can I live like that's really happening? How can I live in a way that addresses that and extricates myself from that as much as possible? That's the only thing I have to bring to the table.
We must become as sane as possible. We have to become sane and live in reality to the extent possible.
That's what I'm working on.
Which is, yep. I just really like everything that because I've said really similar things about like I can only focus on what's near me. I can develop myself as much as possible, make it to where like I'm the best possible influence on my family and my local environment, so that when shit does go horribly wrong, I'm in the best position to kind of help with whatever comes next. But the idea that I'm going to divert the catastrophe is a fucking joke.
Yeah,
like I'm not going to do anything.
When I'm very concerned about environmental issues, so it's like, I don't think that that's not to say human ingenuity. We could be doing a lot more, but it's gonna happen at this point. It's kind of, I wouldn't say point of no return, but like, there will be effects, no matter what. Even if we were to completely change our ways tomorrow, it will still continue to occur because of all the cascades we've set in motion. So, if that's the case, how do I prepare for the kind of world we're supposed to live in? I think, for me, I've been thinking a lot about privilege, and I think that people are actually kind of enchained by their privilege. I've seen people whose problems kind of come from their first world privilege and lifestyle. So it's like, why would I be scared of giving that up? And then trying to live a lifestyle which is, like, genuinely, like, this is happening. So I'm living like it's happening, and when I do think inevitably like we can't continue this way, regardless of like when people are forced to stop living this way. So if it happens in my lifetime, I'll be ready, and I'll also have skills that I can teach to others. That's all I got.
Well, I was hoping the U.S. won't collapse in like the next 20 years. I'm trying to get to Mexico when I'm 35. So like I got like 13 years to do my shit.
Best of luck.
Start prepping instead and focus on water filtration and solar power. And regarding privilege, I'd say like take every advantage you can. Like I'm a white man in my 30s. That affords me certain privileges. As long as I'm conscious that I'm using them, I should not give up advantages to get in the best possible position before the bad stuff starts, as long as I'm not stepping on other people. Like, so that's what the caveat of like me exercising that to get out of a ticket should not be negatively impacting another. Like, I shouldn't sign myself up to take a ticket that I could have gotten out of through wielding privilege just for I guess, the moral points.
I kind of meant more like lifestyle wise. Maybe I don't know, material privilege, like the way that we live in the first world. We're used to it, and people think, again, like experience wise, people think that it's what makes them happy and enjoy themselves, but I actually kind of question that. If a lifestyle of living indoors, watching TV, getting everything from the grocery store, having no connection to your food, if that is actually the best way we can live, and also even if it is, it's not sustainable. So that's just a fact.
Agreed. That was the example. You already said it, but the example I had in mind was like we'd be happier if we knew where our food came from on the plate.
Mm-hmm. I think that I'm trying to move away from what enchains me, but I think actually I used to think more in terms of trying to, like, I thought there was like something redemptive in suffering. So I think I used to think of it more as like I'm sacrificing and I'm earning my right to exist on this planet by like punishing myself or something. But now I'm like, my goals are also to be happy and enjoy myself as much as possible. And so I don't think that there's a separation between the political and the personal in that sense. All right. Anything else before we wrap this up? I think we did pretty good on time. I was a little worried about going over.
Just appreciation. Thanks, Zeal. I don't know that I would have read this book without. I'm glad I came across your post in the subreddit. Glad I read this book. Glad to have been in this conversation. Thanks for putting it together.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for coming.
Josh, have you read the whole book?
Really...
Taz?
Let Taz go.
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to say, it was a very difficult read for me, because I don't really have any or much experience with like philosophy or psychology or like academic texts in general. So it was a tough read for me, but I did it, and I feel like I've gained so much more richness from it, from this conversation and what all of you have had to say. So thank you all so much.
Thank you, Taz. I'm really glad that you got to come today, too. I love you.
I love you, too.
All right. Anything else? Last chance.
I think that should be everything.
Okay. Well, again, thanks so much, guys, and I'm going to wrap that up now.